Welcome, everyone, to the Digital Trust Talks, the Keyfactor series where we sit down with today's leading voices in cybersecurity and we explore the future of digital trust. My name is Ellen Boehm, and I'm very excited to be joined today by two of my esteemed colleagues. I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump right into the topic of the day, which is Agentic AI. So, Ryan, I'll pass it over to you first.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Ryan. I've been with Keyfactor for about 7 years and in cybersecurity for about 10. So nowhere near the chops of Mr. Chris Hickman here, but certainly seen a lot of change in that short amount of time. So I'm excited to talk about, the latest change on that, which is of course AI.
Great. And I'm Mr. Chris Hickman, apparently. Thank you, Ryan. And I am security officer here at Keyfactor, and happy to be here and take on this very timely and relevant topic.
Awesome. Well, thanks both of you for being here. So I lead the IoT strategy and operations at Keyfactor, and I'm also involved in helping to explore this new space with Agentic AI. So with that, let's just jump right into it. So unlike traditional automation, Agentic AI makes its own decisions and takes actions on things. And so the autonomy of that is what is bringing up questions today of how can we trust this? How do we secure these pieces? And especially if they're able to make their own decisions and to take action. So what we want to dig into is what is the foundation for securing that? And how organizations such as yourselves that might be exploring this with proof of concepts or being challenged by your leadership team about how you might be able to leverage AI agents, we want to give you some tricks and tips and some of the best practices that we are hearing and that we really believe as security experts in this space. So I have a couple different questions. We'll kind of be bouncing back and forth between the two of you. But before we do that, I just want to kick it off with a general question. And Chris, I'll go to you. What are you really seeing today in terms of this space? I know there's a few different ways that we're seeing AI agents emerge. So just maybe your thoughts on that. You talk to customers a lot. How are we seeing this come out today?
A lot of talk, a lot of folks sort of exploring what the possibilities are, obviously, of agentic AI. But I think most interesting revelation of late, for want of a better term, is that I'm starting to sort of see two different pools emerge. The first one sort of being the agents that come in as a result of something else. They come in as a CRM package, or they come in as a security aid to help go through logs more efficiently, so on and so forth. And then the second sort of emergence that I'm seeing now is organizations that want to build their own agents for very specific purposes. And ironically enough, I'm also sort of seeing this divergence of security around the two, especially specifically as it relates to things like identity, where a lot of the ones that are sort of prepackaged, it would appear, at least on early symptoms, that those have taken security and identity, let's say, for granted. And the recent breach around Salesloft AI agent is a good example of that, perhaps. And then the ones that are being purposely built, where people are specifically speccing agentic AI for their particular business needs and intend to build it, security and identity is very much at the core of that. And so we're starting to see the emergence of that, as it would line up against any traditional corporate application of needing good identity, needing good security.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes total sense, right? So sort of traditional, so vendor provided, and then more of a purpose-built in-house. And then I think we're going to get into some advice that you have about how we're seeing people bring in best practices that we've used in the industry for years into this sort of new use case. So thanks for that. And just Ryan, same question for you. Just in general, what are you seeing today?
Yeah. So, I mean, to your point, Chris, actually, Gartner, if anyone's a seat holder out there, it's a great article. They have an article on securing custom-built AI agents. So exactly as you've said, I think that's really the focus, right? Is not necessarily what my third-party vendors are introducing into my ecosystem. Although, of course, I want to vet that out too. It's how am I securing the AI systems, AI agents that potentially my development teams are building out to, drive efficiency and innovation within the business. And that's really where organizations need to ensure that they're building protection into that, because that's not something that you can come in afterwards. And it's kind of like IoT, and that's the world you live in, right? Is secure by design. We talk about that a lot, and we need to take the same approach here, secure by design, ensuring that we're thinking security first when it comes to this new innovation.
Well,
Yeah,
I'd hope
that's a
to think
great point.
security first for all of it at the end of the day, but unfortunately, that there does seem to already be that divergence.
Well, but it's
Exactly.
hard, right? If you have your CFO or your operations leader saying we need to cut costs and be more efficient, and then here's something off the shelf that you might be able to try, I could totally see how, one, it's fun, and two, people are being pressured to do it to try to save money and be more efficient. But let's do it in the right way.
Yep.
So, okay. Well, great. Thank you guys for that intro. So, we've been talking about how just AI in general, right, we have started and we're very familiar with the use of bots with generative AI to create content, to create videos and make your a better headshot for you to put on LinkedIn. And now as we're shifting into agentic AI, this is where you have an agent that is smart, that is capable, that can take actions, but that's a really powerful thing, but we have to use it in the right ways. So Ryan, I'm going to go to you first. And I know you have a perspective on this about how enterprises are shifting and trying to take advantage of this. So, there's some stats that we have, such as 92% of companies plan to invest in AI over the next 3 years. Like that's a decent amount, right? Or, there's some studies that say that 25% of companies that are using the Gen AI stuff, right, are going to have agentic pilots within this year. That to me seems like a really rapid adoption, or at least trial, phase. So how do you see this shift changing the way enterprises are thinking about identity and trust, though, and how to build that in?
Yeah. So first, just on your comment on LinkedIn, yeah, everybody suddenly got a lot better looking on their LinkedIn profile. I don't know what happened, but
I need to do
yeah,
that. Yeah.
right. Yeah, when it comes to agentic AI, of course, it presents a lot of opportunity, as you said, to drive efficiency, innovation. I mean, we're seeing some really cool examples out there. Even in healthcare, I think traditionally an industry that tends to lag behind others when it comes to technology. Like I had just heard or read an article the other day about Mayo Clinic starting to integrate agentic automation into their clinical workflows, and that's just incredible to see that this type of efficiency is available to us now. So of course, there's a lot of optimism around it, a lot of hype, but it does present, of course, challenges, right? The vast majority, I think, of organizations out there are not actually using agentic AI in a meaningful way, at least right now. But as you've said, we're moving in that direction, and we expect to see it accelerate in that direction even faster. But we certainly have some hurdles along the way to overcome. And the first one, I think, before we can realize the value of this technology is cybersecurity. So to throw another couple stats out there, we've been talking about this too, Owen, is just the barriers to adopting this, and number one being security and risk, right? Deloitte and I think it was McKinsey did a study on this, on like what is the biggest barrier before you can truly realize the value of this technology, and they asked senior executives, and cybersecurity topped the list in both of those studies. So I think absolutely, as we move forward, this has to be a top priority, right? Is establishing standards and best practices, at least a baseline going forward before we can get to that mainstream adoption. And that's really where identity, as you said, that becomes foundational, right? Because AI agents, just like humans, they need identities. And if we think about AI agents, they're as unpredictable as us humans, but they're also as scalable as workloads. And the combination of those two things makes them incredibly complex. And that we need to ensure that security really is, as we've said, the first element in this mix. Because if you can't identify or verify who, or in this case, what is accessing your systems, then you can't trust it, plain and simple. We do that with humans. We need to apply the same logic here. So every agent, every workload, every human, even in these ecosystems, needs to be authenticated. And I think more importantly, and Chris, you could probably touch on this too, is that AI agents can't just assume the same credentials and the same privileges of humans, which is happening today. Things like passwords and broad use API keys, because not only are those prone to leaks and exposure, as we've seen many cases of, but they're also not tied directly to an identity of a human or an agent. So it can be hard to distinguish between those two if it's just a credential, not an actual identifier. So I think that's a key piece of this is, yes, identity is absolutely important, but it has to be done right.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yes. So I think we've been trying to pass around the phrase, there's no agentic AI security without identity. but identity being specifically certificates as a best practice and a critical foundation. So yeah, Chris, you've been in this identity space for a long time, and you've seen trends come and go, but what are you hearing about the use of certificate-based identities and credentials to help secure these things? I mean, how real is this? How applicable is this? What do you think?
Well, it's 100% applicable. Yeah, and it's not just a cert to identify an agent. There's multiple different facets of how an agent needs to be handled. I like to point towards more of a zero trust type architecture, or least privilege type architecture, right, where identity can be persistent, but authorization should not. Right, the ability to transact should require unique identity for that transaction, so ephemeral in nature, and actually certificates play very, very nicely into that type of a scheme, while adding a whole lot of additional security around it, as cryptographically derived, one-time use. In the case of ephemeral, throw it away. You can revoke the identity through mechanisms already built into the PKI and things of the sort. So I think to that point, they are very well suited both in application, but more importantly in scale. PKI is used to scaling to tens of millions of objects and identities. PKIs underpin a lot of national identity systems and things of the sort. They are able to very quickly serve up those identities and do it in a very efficient way. And more importantly, the standards already exist for the integration pieces for that. So it's not like they're trying to reinvent things. And at this point in time where the push from the boardroom is to adopt agentic AI, security isn't something you should have to try to invent or reinvent. Using what is known and what is foundationally proven is a good path forward to make sure you at least have that layer of security and identity properly taken care of.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So you mentioned zero trust, and I know that has been a mantra in cybersecurity. We talk about the principle of never trust, always verify. Does that, how does that apply when we're talking about AI agents? And I've been thinking about what those basics are, which is you have to prevent unauthorized parties from communicating, you prevent unencrypted traffic from being transmitted. All these seem like things we should be applying to AI agents. So maybe, and I can open up to either one of you. Can you talk a little bit more about this concept of zero trust and how PKI enables that for agentic AI, and not have this be a buzzword, have this be this is why we should be doing it?
Yeah, I mean, the entire premise about basically zero trust is that you don't trust beyond the life of the thing that you're doing. In this case, it would be a transaction or some kind of a query or an operation, and then you're sort of stripped of all privilege until you reevaluate and reprove yourself. And I think one of the reasons why that's so important in agentic AI is because these agents have the ability to learn and to teach themselves, right? They can work off past data sets, and no organization in the world is ever going to get away with, let's say, a data leak that has GDPR consequences, and the excuse being, well, the agent learned everything and communicated it. And that spread over multiple transactions and multiple queries. The whole notion is to basically remove privilege after the operation is complete, so that the agent basically has to relearn for the next operation and spin up. So it's to me, it's foundational to making sure that you don't get scope creep where the agents misbehave themselves, and we've certainly seen examples of that, of agents going off and deleting databases and things of the sort when they shouldn't. There's quite a number of documented cases where agents hallucinate conversations, even or human identity traits, by their learnings and things of the sort. And that comes as a result in a large part of having that persistence of access that the agent is inappropriately programmed with from the get-go. And zero trust is one model we can use to prevent that from happening. Anything you'd add, Ryan?
Right, as you take some coffee. Yeah. Also, your cricket is clearly very interested in this conversation because it got a little quiet there. But I'm glad he's listening in.
I have a cricket somewhere around my office that I have not been able So
I was going to say, we've been having such a great conversation. There was no crickets around, but
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
hear that, keep an eye out, audience.
just wait.
Right when I talk, it's going to come back. Yeah.
Somebody's dog is going to bark just because you said something.
Yeah, exactly.
Inevitable.
Yeah. No, but I like what you said, Chris. I mean, zero trust is it is a buzzword, but it is certainly a valid security model. I think it's more zero implied trust or zero assumed trust is what we really mean by it. And that's certainly true here, right? Because trust is not implicit, it's contextual, it's dynamic, and nowhere is that more true than in an agentic AI system where, as you've said, these things are thinking for themselves, making decisions for themselves. They're accessing your systems and applications, typically through an MCP server. At least that's how we think that that will be facilitated moving forward. But those workloads are very dynamic, very ephemeral, and again, unpredictable. So PKI is a really good technology for that use case because it's been proven out, right? If you require strong and scalable identity, secure machine-to-machine communication, as you said, and encryption, then PKI is your technology, right? That's the way to go. So digital certificates issued from a trusted PKI can really provide those agents with a strong, verifiable identity. We have frameworks in place that can support this already. So like you said, Chris, it's not reinventing the wheel, right? But PKI already enables zero trust today in environments, and AI is just taking another or an already proven infrastructure and just applying that to a new class of workload identities, which are now agentic AI identities.
It really is sort of the intersection, perhaps, of zero trust and the service mesh type model, right? Both which are foundational or rely on PKI to be effective, right? The scale and the size of a service mesh, the zero trust elements of least privilege all the time, or zero trust implied, and then throw along everything to do with scale into that. And it does. It certainly changes the dynamic of how we traditionally look at workloads, right? Perfect example, a customer service agent. I might only need one at one point in time, but if I'm in a retail business, suddenly Black Friday comes and I have to dynamically spin up those agents, right, to tens of thousands. It's got to be able to handle that type of scope and that type of scale. Whatever is the underpinning there of the identity.
Yeah, completely agree. And that's where my head goes, coming from that IoT background, where we have customers that are putting, certs into medical devices, or, millions of meters or chips, or so the use of identities at scale has been done. But I think this is going to be even more in terms of volume, especially when you guys were talking about the ephemeralness, if that's even a word, of some of these identities, however many we're going to have to issue. But if we have that capability to do that, then why wouldn't we? Because the more frequently that you could rotate something, or you could use it for a shorter period of time, it's like the shift that we're seeing in the dropping of the validity period of certificates down to 47 days, in the next couple of years, right? So I think we have to make sure that our systems, our infrastructure, and all that is be prepared to handle this.
And that's why things like API keys and SSH or API tokens and SSH keys and things of the sort have become such high value targets for hijacking, is because they're persistent. They have a longer shelf life to them than they probably should. You don't want to rotate your API keys every 30 seconds, as an example. But one could argue, could you have an authentication mechanism that rotates that frequently? And the answer in a lot of cases is yes. It's just building in the intelligence to do that properly is a little bit more difficult, but doing it up front is what saves you the breach and the failed audits and all of those things downstream that will cause you more pain than taking a little extra time up front.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. When we talk about a breach, it can also be accidental disclosure, right? We see that all the time with humans accidentally putting hard-coded, even code signing certificates. We've seen in firmware. So, I mean, the same thing can happen with agents. They can put credentials where they're not supposed to be. And I think that's also a risk that needs to be well thought through, is not just, the potential for these to be, or systems to be breached and those credentials to be found, but also them to be leaked externally from an agent. That's very likely going to happen and very possible.
Yeah, or to maliciously inject something in to make the agent reveal its own credentials.
Yeah.
If you can think of it, it's probably going to happen. So great comments, guys. And I know also in the chat, I see that there's some feedback and some questions going back and forth. Just given timing, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get into those questions, but I love the dialogue. Thank you. And we'll probably be able to give some comments after the fact in this post. So thank you for that conversation there on the side too. So I do have a couple other quick things. So one really post-quantum, that's something that I feel like I can't do a Keyfactor webinar without talking about that because it is real. And I know we've done a lot. We have a lot of perspective on that. We have a lot of expertise in that space. So maybe my question is, as enterprises are embracing this agentic AI technology, and as we talked about, automation is super important, crypto agility is super important, and part of that is building a strategy to be able to prepare for this post-quantum crypto. So how do we sort of fit that into the conversation of agentic AI and post-quantum crypto? And so, Chris, I want to bring it over to you because you're, again, one of our leaders and experts on this. With this era of quantum computing coming, and then in parallel, people experimenting with agentic AI, how do people prepare for this imminent sort of disruption to crypto today, knowing that they're trying to embark on using agentic AI before that time?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, plan for change. Cryptography has been, traditional crypto has been very good to us for a long period of time. If I were to rub my crystal ball and sort of look into the future, I think we're in for kind of a state of influx of changes of algorithms. We already know there's one coming. The post-quantum adoption, but then we don't know what's going to happen with other future post-quantum algorithms. They may prove to be more efficient, more secure, so on and so forth. So you've got to build that into your agents and knowledge that the cryptography could change. And that's number one, right? Is programming and building these things in with the intention of being able to swap out those parts and pieces and those components without a negative impact to the organization. The other thing is of course, you're going to be spinning up agents by a lot of organizations, thousands, tens of thousands. And there's another area where having visibility into what the cryptographic capability of those agents are to make sure that they're not introducing vulnerable algorithms or vulnerable software stacks, cryptographic stacks, and things of the sort. Also comes into play here. So it's visibility of how do I get from A to B, but it's also making sure that things that come into my supply chain or into my environment, especially some of those third-party ones where you're not as able to dictate what the security model is quite as tightly. You need to have visibility in a post-quantum world of, are they still using RSA? And if they are, being able to go back to the vendor and say that's got to change, as an example. So it's a multifaceted element, but it for all intents and purposes doesn't change. I mean, agentic AI is just a type of application. And I would say that at this point in time, in this juncture, about any type of application, it's just if you're going to start building something new, build it to tomorrow's standards. Don't build it to yesterday's security pylons that are already being knocked over.
Yeah, I was going to say I think a lot of organizations don't realize how deep and wide cryptography actually runs in their infrastructure. Like it's embedded in absolutely everything. It's in applications, it's in endpoints, it's in servers, it's on the network. And if we think about the most challenging areas for migration to post-quantum, it's probably going to be your legacy infrastructure and your custom-built applications. And so we don't want to add to that mix, right? We don't want to add yet another layer to that transition. Let's build it in from the start. You have the opportunity to do that so that it's not going to be as challenging as those other areas of the business. And you can focus on getting those over to a quantum safe standard rather than having to go back on a technology that you just implemented, right?
And also don't always assume there's going to be a human in the loop when it comes to agentic AI at scale. And I think a lot of people are sort of thinking, oh, well, the user authentication, two-factor authentication, things like that, that's what protects us. Agentic AI, when it's at scale, will be completely autonomous. And not capable of doing two-factor authentication, as an example. So if you're going to rely solely on an OAuth type of framework, then or some of the others, you want to think in terms of an agent being completely autonomous and what is the best security that it can use to establish identity and on a go forward basis do what it needs to do. So, I hear a lot of people sort of saying, "Oh, well, we'll just move the user credential through." Well, what happens at a point in time where there is no user credential to pass through in a traditional sense?
Yes. All great points, guys. So we're getting close to the end of our time. So maybe one more question is, this is obviously an emerging ecosystem. There are multiple players and pieces in securing this. Don't get me wrong, security or certificates are a big piece, and that is what Keyfactor does. It's not the only piece. So how does Keyfactor help, and how are we positioned, I guess maybe I should say, Ryan, to help organizations adopt agentic AI as we're part of that ecosystem? What do you think about from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we talked about a few elements of this ecosystem is going to be high scale and very dynamic. And when we look at PKI as a technology, it's very well suited for that. So I think our approach is bring it on, right? Like we've been here before. We've talked about IoT, we've talked about workloads, microservices. Every one of these new technologies that has come about, PKI has found a way in establishing trust in those technologies. So I think this is just the next wave. So Keyfactor, I think we're really excited about this, right? Is our PKI platform is really scalable. Issuing and managing identities at scale in these environments is going to be really important. And we already do that at a scale of millions, even billions for some of our customers. So, to meet that kind of scale and fit those kind of complex ecosystems, it's really got to be flexible to operate where these agents do. It's got to be able to scale like they do, and it's got to be able to integrate, as you've said, with the technology stack around it, not just certificates, but the PAM providers and other identity providers and components of the cryptography stack too, like HSMs, ensuring that there's tight integrations there. So I think those are all key pieces that we really do well, and I think that's why we're so well positioned to address this problem for our customers as well.
Mm-hmm. Right, thank you. And Chris, I know you speak with a lot of CISOs and security leaders. Is there any other pieces of advice that you want to leave those leaders with as their organizations are just embarking on testing this?
Yeah, I think most of the people I speak with and I have spoken with on this topic get it, right? But I guess the way I would frame it back to the rest of the organization outside of security is you're essentially, from a security standpoint, you're asking me to add somewhere between 2 and 10,000 employees on demand at any point in time, who, by the way, they're not people. Therefore, I can't take my traditional controls, but they act as people in a lot of the functions that they do. I think the risk associated with that changes the conversation. It's not just an IT problem or a security problem at that point in time. And organizations really need to think long and hard about not just the security infrastructure, but how they can drive the right policy frameworks around agentic AI to make sure that it's properly done and that identity and security maintains its spot as a fundamental to make sure the organization stays safe. And make sure that in the same way that you wouldn't introduce a piece of software with a weak cryptographic module or no identity, nobody would bring anonymous email into the environment today, as an example. You want to make sure you have those policies and procedures in place to say this does not meet the minimum for my organization for security as it relates to agentic AI, which is kind of a wedge between that human and application space. So it does need some thought there. You can't just say it is this or it is that. It is sort of a little bit of both, and there may be some impact there you need to consider.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Thank you. So we covered a lot of things. And again, I know internally we've been talking about this, and as well as with our customers for the past several weeks. And it seems like it evolves as we sort of discover and think through as well. But is there any last bits that we didn't cover, or any other pieces of advice before we wrap this session up?
I was gonna say I have my shirt here, Encrypt Like It's 2030. I was gonna show. Because I think we all got to be thinking that way, right? We've got these great shirts, but I mean, it applies to this too, right? Encrypt Like It's 2030, we talk about it in the context of post-quantum, but the same applies here when it comes to your AI agents, right? Being dynamic, being agile with your cryptography is going to be absolutely critical moving forward. So I think a first step too is just talk to your vendors, not just Keyfactor in this context, there's a lot of vendors that play in this ecosystem and ensuring that you know not only what they're doing, but what they can enable you to do. And I think that's the first step when we talk about quantum. Same goes here with Agentic AI. Just talk to your vendors, get to know the ecosystem, and start doing your research, because this is certainly something that's going to come fast and furious if it's not already in your organization.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, Ryan, and to add my thought, if somebody hasn't asked you about Agentic AI yet, it's only a matter of time before they do. Make sure that you're playing from ahead and not from behind as it relates to the introduction of Agentic AI into your organization, especially as it relates to security and identity. Get those policies agreed upon and thought through up front. And as again, I'll reiterate a little bit of what I opened with, which is, this is it's going to come. It's going to come quickly. It's a good time to leverage existing technology that you've got and proven technology that's been used to this scale over and over again. This is probably not a good time to try to invent some new type of credentialing or some new type of algorithmic use. There's enough change going on in the world today. Let's stick with what we know and that we know is secure, and let's move forward with that and keep our businesses safe.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, your comments, Chris, made me think, if you're not being asked, then you soon will be. But I think probably as security leaders, this is happening within your organization and you don't know about it. And you are going to find out about some of these security, not best practices, when there is an audit or when there is a breach, or when there is, something that was built in just even as a trial or a test that then is buried and will emerge at some point in time, because that history repeats itself, and that has happened in a couple different places. So really great conversation, guys. I really appreciate it. So in summary, obviously, Agentic AI is changing the way that we think about digital trust. So identity, zero trust principles, crypto agility, all of that stuff that we talked about is essential for organizations to stay ahead in this space, especially when we have this post-quantum cryptography coming on the horizon. So thank you all for joining us in these digital trust talks. There's plenty of other topics I know that have already been on sessions and more to come. So check out our website and follow us on LinkedIn for more information. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, guys.